Alright, so we already talked about the new 5-star servant that's coming out with Lost Belt 7.2. Let's talk about another servant that's also dropping with 7.2, whose name I also cannot pronounce. So I'm just going to be calling her Pretender Lady, a quick AoE servant, whatever you want to call her, right? I'm just going to be calling her that so I don't butcher her name and have like 80 people in the comments being like, I can't believe ZTO couldn't pronounce the name or whatever. I'm like, look, I'm sorry, man. If I butcher the name, I butchered the name. That's why we're just going to call her Pretender Lady. But in a similar vein, she's kind of like just generically good. Like, I felt that the 5-star wasn't doing anything super insane, but it just looks like he's going to be just generally pretty solid, maybe a little bit better when it comes to like challenge quests or more difficult fights, as opposed to actually being a farming servant. She's just kind of like actually standard.jpg, just really good servant. And it's kind of nice that she's a pretender, because if you've ever used like an alter ego for farming, yeah, it could be really annoying on like mixed nodes where there's like assassins and sabers, but they're really good when you have those mixed nodes where there's like an assassin and a caster node, right? Like that can be really strong for them. And pretenders are pretty much just the inverse of that. So instead of the cavalry classes, it's the knight classes. So she could be really nice for like, say, a saber lancer node, something along those lines, because she's a quick AoE, I would say farming servant, because she's actually looking like she's going to be really solid. But we're going to talk about her in today's video. If you have not already, make sure you leave a like and you subscribe to the channel. I am still pretty tired. I'm still feeling it a lot from yesterday, pretty much staying up till I tried to stay up like all day to like try to fix my sleep schedule, but I ended up crashing like midday and took a little bit of a nap. So I'm still feeling it a little bit, but you know, daily FGO content. I got to make sure that people are informed about this mobile game that I love a lot, right? Let's be honest. I like this game a lot. So, you know, I got to make sure people are informed. So leave a like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Peep the links down in the description down below. But let's actually talk about this new servant, because I think she's really interesting. And I think she's built in a very good way, because it pretty much all centralizes around her giving herself this field shore here. And this is what kind of just like spreads out and makes the rest of her kit just insanely good, because it's going to give her pretty much everything, right? You guys know that I talk about like the trifecta of farming, that being like a battery, a good card buff, and an NP gain buff if you are a quick or art servant. And for a buster servant, I guess it would be like an NP damage buff, so you synergize a little bit better with Oberon, which is kind of nice for that. But they more or less just have like the duality of farming, and that's just battery and the ability to do really big damage. But she's built in a very interesting way, because she gets all of that, and it's pretty much all just turned on by this first skill. What it's going to do is it's going to give her a 30% battery immediately, which that's already really good as is, because if you want to invest in her append skill, you can give her like a fake 50% battery. But it's also just really nice and just being able to synergize with event CEs. You know, if you have like a 50% event CE, this is 30%, and you can find 20% somewhere else, even if it's as simple as like slapping on one of the master mystic codes that like gives you 20%. Just something really simple. It gives you some synergy with that, right? So that's really nice in and of itself. But then she's also going to give herself 10% NP every single turn for 3 turns. That's really nice, because let's say you have a lower NP version of her and you're not getting as much overkill as you need to really be just getting like max NP back every single time. This can be really nice, because this is kind of help her kind of stay a little topped off when it comes to her actual NP gauge. It's very similar to what Zenobia does, right? Zenobia, I found when I use her for farming, that even though she doesn't have the big fat battery, the fact that she's giving herself like 20% NP at the end of every turn ends up making her farm like okay, even at like NP1. So I think this is going to also make her very, very solid, because she also has the battery in conjunction with that. But then this again is turning on all the rest of her skills. So just know this is what you want to go ahead and just like fire immediately. Even if you're like, oh, I've already got like a scope or something going on, you're going to want it for the NP every single turn and for this shore buff over here, because that's going to help her out a lot when it comes to either using her for farming or even for challenge quests, because she's got like 70% crit damage, which is really insane if you've got that shore buff online. So then we just kind of have like her solid charisma buff that she's giving to everybody. It's a little bit more of a beefy charisma, because it's doing a bit more. So instead of being on a 5-turn cooldown, it's going to be on a 6, but you're getting the 20% attack buff to the entire party. You're getting 20% crit buff to the entire party. Everybody gets sure hit. And then she has this interesting little niche, and I'm assuming this has to do with the other guy that dropped, because he gives himself a guts. So she can remove a guts from one of your enemies And then if she does that, she smacks them with a 50% defensive down on all enemies for 3 turns. So it's like, it's not something you'll be able to get against all bosses, but if you do, you are going to absolutely obliterate those people because they have minus 50% defense for 3 turns on top of like the buffs that you're going to be able to give yourself on skills 1, 2, and 3. And then you're also just debuffing them just insanely by smacking them with massive defense down. But like, even if that whiffs, like let's say that this debuff just ends up whiffing, right? You don't actually get it. You still remove their guts off of them as well, which is also really useful because it's also kind of preventing your opponent from having some method or survivability. Again, like I'm saying, she's doing a lot, right? Like, not only does this like allow her to be really good in CQs because it's removing enemy buffs, but it's also going to allow her to do a lot of damage against those bosses, which I think is really cool. But then you start moving on to skill 3 in the NP. Skill 3 kind of completes her kit, right? Because these are all selfish buffs for herself. She's giving herself like a 30% quick, arts, and crit damage buff. So between skill 2 and 3, that's 50%. Again, we'll talk about her passive where she gets an additional 20% crit damage. But then she's also giving a little bit of damage cut to the entire party. I do like this because it's some pretty thick damage cut at 2k. And if you guys will know, a lot of the quick teams aren't super tanky, right? Like original Scotty, the caster Scotty, a lot of her meta was based around if you could obliterate the enemy in 3 turns, right? Like they kind of epitomized the 3-turn meta where you were just trying to beat everything in 3 turns because after that you like lost all of your buffs and you really couldn't hang in there. And Merlin's team was still kind of good because at the very least it had a lot of sustainability. So it's still kind of good for that. It's going to make you a little tankier for those 3 turns that at least lets you kind of hang in there in case like a wayward crit comes and just knocks one of your Scotties or, you know, hits your lady over here. They can actually like kind of live the hit. I think that's really nice. But I think what kind of like turns this into like a bit more insane, or we're getting the crit buff here, is the passive. It's the passive over here. Now, oh, okay, I had this pulled up because I thought it was a little bit easier to understand in the way that they worded it, but regardless, I think they might have worded it a little bit better over here. I think they might have updated it. But regardless, not only is she giving herself a 12% arts buff, which is really good. I mean, that's going to be really nice if you ever get crits on her arts cards for like massive swings and NP gain. But this is really nice, right? Because she's giving herself just a free additional 20% crit damage when you have like this water side buff. And I believe her giving herself the shore buff counts for that. Somebody could try to correct me on that, but I believe this actually does count because they have the same icon. I know there was a little bit of tomfoolery going on with the other guy because he had like the negate sunlight buff, but this at least still has the same buff. So I believe this means that anytime she fires her first skill, she's got 70%, you know, additional, like she's got 70% crits. That's going to be absolutely insane because again, her star gen's really solid. Her quick cards, as you can see, are really good. She's an AoE quick servant, so she's going to be dropping stars on her 6-hit AoE NP, just dropping them all over the place. And then she's going to be smacking the enemy for insane crits. And then I guess if you're also using her with like the Ruler Scotty and the Caster Scotty combo, it's kind of like all of her cards will be really good because Caster Scotty's going to buff up the Buster card. Ruler Scotty's going to give her extra crits on the Quick card. That can actually be really, really nice. So she's just built in a way where like, I don't think she's doing anything insanely like new and OP, but it's just the fact that like her kit is just really good because you finally look at her NP, like I mentioned, 6 hits is going to be really good for farming. Her NP gain is passable, right? Like it should be good enough, but then even if you didn't think it was, she gives herself the NP gain buff if she's got that field shore thing going on. So as long as the first skill is up, she's got the trifecta. She's got the NP gain, she's got the battery, she's got battery over time, which might make it like the quadfecta or whatever you would want to call it, and then plus a really solid card buff of 30%. And then her arts cards are going to be absolutely insane because keep in mind, she's got double passives for that, which is stupid dummy insane, right? But then there's also something else that she does that's interesting. So she gives herself the NP damage buff, which is nice. It's going to help out her damage, right? But this is what I think is interesting. So we've talked about on the channel how there are some servants that like, as they fire their NP, they get stronger as the battle is going on because they're stacking NP damage. So every single node, they're hitting harder. It's getting easier from the loop. If you've used like Muramasa or Jason recently over on the NA version, you've kind of felt those effects. Or like Space Ishtar, for instance. She's also a really good example. What she's doing is she's not stacking her own NP damage. She's stacking NP damage on her allies, right? Because she's giving them a 20% NP damage buff that lasts for 3 turns, except for herself. which is really interesting because it seems like they really want you to try to use her with Ruler Scotty, because keep in mind, Ruler Scotty has an offensive NP, so it's almost like she can kind of be like the main DPS, but she can also allow your Ruler Scotties to do some pretty good damage because she's going to be stacking NP damage on them and giving them this really solid attack buff over here, right? That's going to multiply it into each other and potentially give them a huge defense down on all the enemies. It might make her really interesting to use when it comes to like challenge quests and stuff. Again, I think like final verdict, she's definitely going to be really good, but it's going to remain to see like if she's going to be like a really high 1.5 tier contender or if she'd be in like that tier 1 status, because she's definitely going to be up there. She's definitely really, really strong. I think the only thing that you could really hold against her is, like the other guy, her attack is kind of low and her HP is pretty high, right? So that would be the only thing that you hold against her, but I don't know. It seems like with her being able to like triple buff herself, she should still be doing decent. She might be one of those servants that maybe seems a little unimpressive at NP1, and then at like NP2, it's like, oh, she's stupid, dummy, insane. You know, think of someone like Kiara, right? Like Kiara kind of had that same thing kind of going for her as well, where, you know, you looked at her at NP1 and it was like, okay, she's all right. And then you get her at NP2 and she's just insane, like, because she can actually do some pretty decent damage at that point. I don't know, but I definitely think she's going to be very, very strong. I think both of these servants are very strong. I'm hoping we actually end up getting that foreigner servant that we also saw. I think her name is Kukulon or whatever. She's like the very similar to like Ket's type servant that everybody's also kind of clamoring over. I hope we get her. I've seen a little bit of her details. She seems pretty good, but if she's anywhere in the same like ballpark as these two, if not better, it's going to be a pretty nutty celebration. Like if you're looking in the future on the NA version, these guys are really strong. They're not like game-breakingly strong, but just for like, you know, kind of releasing guys into the story, very, very strong guys. Kind of keeping with like the Lost Belt theme where like, well, I guess Ivan wasn't super insane on release and Anastasia was kind of all right. But like you think of some of the other like high tier people we've gotten like technically Scotty is a Lost Belt servant, even though she dropped for Anniversary. So I don't know, maybe one of you it as like Sigurd. Maybe Scotty's a bad example, but Arjuna Alta, right? Arjuna Alta is really good. Romulus is really solid. Chi Shi Huang is really good. Morgan is really good. Melusine's really good. Think about like those servants. It's like, I don't know if they're like on that like insano like Arjuna Alta tier, but maybe they'll end up being that good as well. Because I don't know. Like I think about like them versus Arjuna Alta. They're just kind of doing really good stuff innately. Whereas Arjuna Alta, you can maybe argue still has to like debuff people and whatnot. Don't know. I think they're going to be really, really strong. I think they're both definitely like going to be high-end tier 1.5, if not just solidly into tier 1. But I'd like to hear you guys' thoughts in the comments down below because I think they're both really solid. I probably will actually end up summoning for this servant because, dude, her second ascension, this is absolutely like adorable. Like this is chef's kiss, right? And it's super funny because, okay, if you don't want a spoiler, you can cover your ears for 5 seconds, all right? You've covered your ears, you covered your ears, all right? She's like Mexico City in the Lost Belt, so like she's the embodiment of the city, and I think that's hilarious, right? That's why she's a pretender. So I think that's really, really funny. So I'm definitely going to be summoning for this servant. Expect that video maybe in like the next day or two. I'll probably do that on stream. But yeah, I'll catch you guys in the next one. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. And yeah, peace.